Hey everybody, sitting here at the rolling table making some cigars. Um, and so I talked about that I was going to do a discussion on empathy as it relates to the current election cycle, and or the lack of empathy actually, and kind of the ugliness that has resulted from that. And so I thought I'd do that while I'm working, so bear with me. I did this on YouTube because when I do the Facebook videos, sometimes the signal's not great. So, anyways, empathy is often misunderstood and misdefined. I see it a lot because I hang around a lot of writers, and so I wanted to help out with that. Empathy, for the most part, is the ability to understand and at some level uh, emotionally uh, connect with someone else, so that you're able to understand their position, or why they do what they do, and at some level emotionally connect with it, so that you have some feeling for what they're going through. And what has happened is in America, which is kind of overwhelmed with sociopathy. America is basically a nation of sociopaths, and this has happened over the last 20 or 30 years. And sociopathy is really the opposite of empathy. It's not an antonym of empathy, but sociopaths feel no empathy. They don't have the ability to understand what other people think, or what other people feel, or what hurts other people, or why people do what they do. And since that is really the defining element of American society now, you can understand why there's a complete lack of empathy, and why we end up with two really diametrically opposed, at some level, political parties that have no longer come to the conclusion that their opponents disagree with them, but that they're evil and that they must be destroyed. That's kind of where we are. And they're not diametrically opposed in anything other than that understanding. Everything else they pretty much agree on. They agree on so many things, it's amazing. All right, so what's happened is the word sympathy, the word empathy has been confused with sympathy. People think that because they feel sympathetic when someone's family died, or some have some feeling of understanding of what happens when you lose something or you have hard times, that's empathy. And it's not. And it's because there's an overemphasis on the emotional side of the definition of empathy, which is really supposed to be the smallest part of it. Empathy, in its biggest understanding, is an intellectual ability to understand what someone who disagrees with you, or what another person, how they got to where they are, how they've gotten to the understanding that they have, even if you totally disagree. And so I think a lot of people get that confused, because they feel like that in order to have empathy for somebody, you have to agree with them, or you have to come to a point where you are satisfied that they are right. And so it leads to some really, really weird stuff. For example, there was an article, I saw somebody on Facebook posted an article that was in the New York Times that was really chilling to me. And basically the whole gist of the story was that if one particular worldview, and you could plug in any of them, I have a little fan going here, so that if one particular worldview would dump all their distinctives, if they would get rid of everything that they believed, the reasons why they believed it, then they can be considered intellectual. Then they can be accepted into the world of intellectual thinking. And of course, this is This is evidence of what I'm saying, that there's a profound lack of empathy or understanding of why people believe what they believe and what belief is, and that we don't choose it. And so what this has led to is a whole lot of people out there who seem to think themselves as complete, whole human beings who have an angry disposition towards an entire segment of the population because they believe that those people know that they are wrong and are just evil. So if you don't like Hillary or Obama, it's not that you disagree with their position. It's that they know that what they're doing is going to destroy America and kill millions of people and leave everybody disarmed. They know that this is going to happen, and they're doing it anyway because they're just evil. Likewise, those people that are anti-Trump, who think it's amusing to portray Trump followers or Trump supporters as ignorant, inbred, evil, racist, misogynist assholes who only want to destroy whatever it is that these people believe America is all about. They want to do that, and therefore they're not just wrong, they're evil. And this is where we are. This is kind of what's developed as the opinion of most people, and it's called radicalization, and it's how they make terrorists in those areas where terrorism and radicalization is prominent, more prominent. This is how you do it. This is how the Hutus and the Tutsis went at each other, and how we ended up with 800,000 dead in just a few months because there was a barrage. First there came a lack of empathy, and then there became a barrage of this type of propaganda that said that the Tutsis were not just people that disagreed or people that were in power or people that wanted certain things, but that they were evil devils who deserved to be killed. And that's how you motivate 80% of the population to kill 20% of the population. And that's what's happening in the Democratic and Republican Party, is that there's a lack of any intellectualism at all, where people are able to understand why someone might come to a different conclusion, what worldviews that they hold. As I mentioned, there was an article in the New York Times, and for the most part it stated that if conservative proponents would just drop all of their distinctives, everything. In other words, if you would just become Democrats, then we could have a two-party system where we're both intellectuals and we could both work. And I've seen the same thing on the right. I've seen people who have made articles that, if Hillary or if Obama would just drop their socialism, if they would drop their idea that big government is good and that taxation can be utilized to bring about social good, if they would just drop all that, then they could still be Democrats, and then we could have a dialogue. But the fact is, those things are distinctives. That's what creates. That's what they are. That's what they determined is right. And so you don't tell somebody that in order to understand them and live at peace with them, they have to become you. That you have to think just like you think. And the meme world where everybody is, because they're stupid, are only capable of sharing opinions that are formed for them by some meme mill or some propaganda mill like Huffington Post or Breitbart, and that there are people out there pumping out these pictures with words on them that are full of logical fallacies, and somehow this encapsulates your position and you can drop the mic and walk away because it proves your point. Does nothing but emphasize that we are a radicalized culture, and by we I mean you. And this is not the way it was designed to be. There was an understanding in the formation of America, and I'm not going to say that I agree with any or all of the foundational ideas of America, but there was some brilliance there, and the brilliance was that there was an understanding that people were going to disagree. There was already disagreement, and there was hypocrisy and that sort of thing when the documents were being written. But there was an understanding that there was going to be a disagreement, and therefore the Constitution and the amendments were designed, and the amendment process were designed so that it would be very, very, very difficult for it to be changed. And the foundational idea was that there are things you can't do, the government cannot do, and that allows people that have completely diametrically opposed opinions to live as neighbors, because they are allowed to have their opinions and they're allowed to voice their opinions and they're allowed to, but they're not allowed to violate the rights of the other person. And so those rights became sacrosanct, and the government was not allowed to pick one side of over the other. And of course, over the decades and over the centuries, these two parties developed, and they've now determined that what you do is you stack the Supreme Court so that you can, and Democrats or Republicans are the same in that neither one of them respect the Constitution. They just disagree over what parts of it should be easily violated. The Democratic Party thinks it's perfectly fine if we encroach upon the Second Amendment and the First Amendment, but they want other amendments to be untouchable, whereas the Republicans are completely fine with many violations of the First Amendment and the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, etc., but they want the Second Amendment to be untouchable. And then there are a lot of us out there who think that all of them should be untouchable, that they should be left alone. But the problem is now that you have radicalization, what proceeds from radicalization is that there's the use of the electoral process to put people in office who will impose, even violently, opinions that are not universal. They're not universally. And so, you have people out there saying, well, they should be universal. Everybody should just agree on, make a list. If you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, everybody should agree on that. Those things should be absolute, and then we can disagree on whether you like vanilla ice cream or you like chocolate ice cream or whatever. And that's the main tenet right now, is imposing your distinctives when there are legitimate opposition opinions to those distinctives, imposing those as the basis of humanity, or the basis of the other person being a human. So a friend of mine on Facebook the other day was bashing some group because they were doing what they believed to be true. And if you find that intolerant, that's fine. And then this guy came on there, and this is really the definition of what's wrong, of the sickness, of the mental sickness that's going on. Is this guy was advocating, using sarcasm, advocating intolerance by saying that you should be able to be intolerant to intolerant people. Of course, that's a circle that you don't want to live where that ends up. Tolerance, by its definition, is to tolerate that which you find abhorrent, if it's lawful, and things that you disagree with, that you understand that in order for us to live free as a people, we have to have the ability to have fundamental disagreements on worldviews without killing each other, or without creating an environment where the other person is non-human, is not worthy of defense and life. And that's where we're heading. And so when I use the term radicalization a lot on Facebook, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that most of you out there have become radicalized. I'm not asking you to agree with people that disagree with you. I'm not asking you to agree with diametrically opposed opinions. I'm saying that you're missing a fundamental element of intellectual growth, and that is the ability to see why somebody believes what they believe. You should be able to fully be able to intellectually walk down the road, the logic road that somebody else went down, and perhaps you identify where they departed from your understanding or from truth even. And but you still should be able to understand how they got where they got. And people that disagree with you don't disagree with you because that is what they want to do. I mean, most people, there are sick people out there, but most people are not disagreeing because they know they're wrong. They're disagreeing because they've either come to a different conclusion based on the same information, or they have departed somewhere. They've had a logic fallacy or something that has caused them to end up other than where you ended up. And this is something you should be able to understand, even if you don't like it, even if you think that they're wrong, even if you think that they're, in some ways, they're dangerous. The system was designed so that people with diametrically opposed opinions could live as neighbors and not kill each other, because there was a law that would protect them. And so, you don't murder them. They have a right to defend themselves, and they have a right to free speech, and they have a right. All of these rights meant that you are allowed to live and believe what you want to believe without imposing that on other people. And what we've had now, going back 100 years, is more than 100 years, is two political parties who are intent on imposing their thought process, their worldview on other people, forcing them to live in a way that is contrary to their own consciences. And so they use the law. They want to elect people that will manipulate the law. They want to elect judges who will change the law. And they want to elect people that are going to choose Supreme Court justices who are going to impose their understanding on to violate these constitutional strictures. So this is a problem, and the problem is that if you individually don't come to the understanding that you have to be able to understand other people, even if you don't agree with them, even if you're going to vote against them, whatever you're going to do, that you're going to end up in violence. This is going to be a violent society, and it's about to get worse. And this is where you're heading because you're radicalized. And empathy is not purely an emotional ability to see a crippled person or a poor person or somebody who's suffering hard times or someone whose father died. That's sympathy. And empathy is the ability to understand someone and to understand why they do what they do. Even an extreme person, even somebody you think ought to be in prison, even a killer. I worked in law enforcement for a while, a long time ago, and you can understand that what someone did is illegal and they should be punished for it and they should be imprisoned or whatever, and still have the intellectual ability to see how they got where they got, so that you can understand what errors they made in their logic process. And that's empathy. And there is some feeling involved in that, the ability to see why somebody feels that way. But if you're not able to do that, then you're actually lacking a huge portion of what should make you human and what should make you a peaceful person and a reasonable person. So I had told some people I was going to talk about that, and I'll be glad to listen to any questions you have. You can always email me at mbunker@michaelbunker.com. My website's michaelbunker.com. You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/offgrid. But thanks for letting me ramble. Talk to you later.